The contract smelled like photocopier toner and the death of everything Rhea Callahan had left. She sat at her kitchen table, the same scarred pine her husband had built 17 years ago, and stared at the signature line. Outside, March wind screamed across the flats, rattling window panes that probably should have been replaced a decade back. Should have. That phrase had become the chorus of her life. Should have saved more money. Should have planted winter wheat instead of hoping the cattle prices would hold. Should have told Jake to see a doctor when he started getting those headaches. Should have, should have, should have. Her pen hovered. Black ink, cheap plastic barrel, the kind you got free from the feed store when you bought a pallet of supplement. The lawyers in Cheyenne would have used something fancier, but they weren't here. Just her and this piece of paper that would erase the Callahan name from county records for the first time since 1887. The developer's offer sat printed in clean sans serif type. $3.2 million for 800 acres, mineral rights included, possession in 90 days. It was more money than she'd see in 3 lifetimes of ranching. More than enough to disappear. Maybe somewhere with an ocean. She'd never seen the ocean. Rhea pressed the pen to paper. The knock at the door made her hand slip, dragging a line of ink across the page. She knew that knock. 3 firm raps, evenly spaced, the kind of knock that didn't expect to be ignored. Nobody else knocked like that. Most folks around here just walked in if they saw your truck in the drive. Go away, Dane. She didn't look up. The door opened anyway. It always did. She'd stopped locking it after Jake died. What was the point? There was nothing left worth stealing. Dane Holloway filled the door frame the way he filled most spaces, reluctantly, like he was apologizing for taking up room in the world. 6'3" in his socks, lean in the way of men who worked until their bodies burned off everything soft. Carhartt jacket, worn pale at the elbows, hat in his hands, dark hair showing the first threads of gray at his temples, even though he was only 42. Same as her. Heard something in town, he said. Rhea kept her eyes on the contract. I'm sure you heard lots of things. It's a small town. Heard you're selling to Western Horizons Development. Didn't realize my business was public property. It is when surveyors start walking property lines with GPS units. He stepped inside, boots leaving clods of half-frozen mud on the linoleum. It is when the county clerk starts talking about subdivisions and impact studies. She finally looked up. Big mistake. Dane had eyes the color of January sky, that pale, washed-out blue that went on forever. She'd made a point of not looking directly at those eyes for 10 years. Easier that way. I'm selling, she said. It's done. The hell it is. He moved closer, and she caught the smell of him, wood smoke and diesel fuel and something else, something that reminded her of before. You signed that yet? About to. Don't? It's not your decision, Dane. The hell it's not. His voice went quiet, which meant he was angry. Dane Holloway didn't yell. Never had. Not even when his own place burned 6 years back and took half his winter hay with it. You think I spent 10 years keeping this place running so you could hand it over to some corporation that's going to carve it into 40-acre ranchettes for California lawyers? Heat flashed through her. You didn't do it for me. You did it because Jake asked you to. Something crossed his face, there and gone, too quick to name. Maybe. There's no maybe about it. She stood up, needing the distance, needing to move. The kitchen suddenly felt too small. He made you promise, I know he did. Last thing he said before... Her throat closed. Even after 10 years, sometimes it's still closed. Before? Dane's voice was soft now, dangerous soft. Before he died. The words came out flat. She'd had a lot of practice saying them. Brain aneurysm 48 hours from first symptom to funeral. You know this. Everybody knows this. I know what he asked me. Dane set his hat on the counter. Careful, like it mattered. I know what I said yes to. Then you know you can stop now. Rhea grabbed the contract, held it up. This absolves you. Whatever promise you made, whatever obligation you think you've got, it's over. I'm selling. I'm leaving. You don't have to take care of Jake's widow anymore. That's what you think this is? That's what I know it is. She threw the contract back on the table. You fixed my fences. You helped with calving. You kept the machinery running when I couldn't afford to hire it done. You did exactly what a good neighbor does when a woman loses her husband and doesn't know a damn thing about running a cattle operation. Rhea, I'm grateful, truly, but I don't need charity anymore. Charity. He said the word like it tasted bad. What else would you call it? I'd call it... He stopped, swallowed, turned away and looked out the window at the hills, at the land that rolled away toward the mountains in waves of scrub grass and sage. It doesn't matter what I'd call it. No, Rhea said quietly. It doesn't. The silence stretched out between them, familiar as the land itself. They'd gotten good at silence over the years. Whole conversations could pass in the space between words, in the things neither of them said. Finally, Dane turned back. You really want to sell? I really need to. Need and want aren't the same thing. They are when you've got $18,000 in property taxes coming due and another $12,000 for equipment notes you can't cover. The numbers came out bitter. She'd been over them so many times they'd worn grooves in her brain. They are when beef prices are down 30% and you're running a third of the cattle you need to break even. They are when you're 42 years old and you've spent the last decade just trying not to drown, and you're so tired you can't remember what it felt like not to be tired. Dane's jaw worked. No. She cut him off hard. Whatever you're about to offer, no. You've done enough. You don't know what I was going to say. I know you. You were going to offer to help, money or labor or some combination of both, and I'm saying no. Why? Because I can't keep taking from you. The words came out louder than she meant, cracking in the middle. She took a breath, forced her voice level. I can't keep being the project you fix because my husband asked you to. I can't keep watching you sacrifice your own operation to keep mine limping along. It's not fair to you. What about what's fair to you? What's fair to me is getting out before this place takes everything I have left. She picked up the pen again. I'm signing tonight. They want to close in 2 weeks. 2 weeks. Something happened in his face. You weren't even going to tell me. I'm telling you now. After it's done. After there's nothing I can do about it. There was never anything you could do about it, Dane. This was my decision. Mine. He looked at her then, really looked at her, and she had to force herself not to turn away. Is it? What's that supposed to mean? Is it your decision, or are you just running? The words hit like a fist to the sternum. Get out! Rhea! Get out of my house! Her hands were shaking. She shoved them in her pocket so he wouldn't see. You don't get to come in here and judge my choices. You don't get to tell me I'm running when you have no idea. Her voice cracked again. She hated that. Hated the way her body betrayed her, showing weakness when she needed to be strong. Dane didn't move. You're right. I don't know, so tell me. Tell you what? What you're really running from. I'm not... Bullshit. The word was soft but absolute. I've watched you for 10 years, Rhea. Watched you work yourself to exhaustion. Watched you take on debt you couldn't service trying to keep this place exactly like Jake left it. Watched you turn down help from everybody who offered it. I didn't turn down your help because Jake made me promise. His voice was quiet. And we both know I'd never break a promise to a dying man. It was safe. You could take my help because it came with obligation, not choice. Her throat felt tight. That's not fair. No? Then why are you selling to some faceless corporation instead of to me? I made an offer 3 months ago. You wouldn't even discuss it. She had forgotten that. Or maybe she'd buried it deliberately. Dane had approached her in December, snow flying sideways, and said he'd buy her out at fair market value if she was serious about selling. She'd said no before he finished the sentence. Your offer was too low, she said. My offer was $50,000 more than what Western Horizons is paying, and you know it. That's not... She stopped. There was no point in lying. He'd see through it, same as he saw through everything else. I don't want to sell to you. Why not? Because I can't... The words stuck. She forced them out. I can't stay here if you own it. I can't drive past and see you running cattle on land that was supposed to be... She stopped. Supposed to be what? Dane's voice was very quiet now. Yours and Jake's forever? Yes. The admission felt like failure. It was supposed to be ours. We had plans. Real plans. Not just surviving, but actually building something. A legacy. Kids, maybe, if we'd been blessed with them. Something that mattered. It still could be. No. She shook her head hard. It can't. Jake's gone. There is no ours anymore. There's just me and a pile of debt and land I can't afford to keep. Selling to you would just mean watching someone else live the life I was supposed to have. And selling to developers who will pave it over is better? At least I won't have to see it. The silence came back, heavier this time. Outside, the wind picked up, shrieking around the eaves. A shutter banged somewhere, the same shutter that had been loose for 3 years. Jake had meant to fix it that last summer, added it to the list of things he never got around to. Dane picked up his hat. For a moment, she thought he was going to leave. Instead, he turned it over in his hands, studying it like he'd never seen it before. You know what Jake told me? He said finally. Right at the end, when he knew what was happening? Ria's chest went tight. I don't want to, he said. Don't let her bury herself with me. Dane looked up. Those were his exact words. He was terrified you'd do exactly what you've been doing. Work yourself into the ground trying to maintain something that was never meant to be maintained alone. Stop. He didn't ask me to keep the ranch running. He asked me to keep you from disappearing into grief. Dane's voice was rough now, like the words were tearing something on the way out. And I failed. I've been failing for 10 years, watching you turn into a ghost, and I didn't know how to stop it without... He cut himself off. Without what? Ria's heart was pounding now, hard enough to hurt. It doesn't matter. You don't get to do that. You don't get to say half of something and then walk it back. Dane's hands tightened on the hat brim. Without breaking the promise I made him. What promise? You said he asked you to keep me from burying myself. You've been doing that. That wasn't the only promise. The room felt too hot suddenly, too close. Ria's pulse hammered in her ears. What else did he ask you to do? Dane looked at her, and for the first time in 10 years, she saw something in his face that wasn't carefully controlled, something raw and hurting and absolutely terrified. He asked me to stay away from you, Dane said. Really away. Not just physically. He asked me to keep my distance, to help when you needed it, but never to... He stopped again. Never to what? Never to act on how I felt about you. The words dropped into the silence like stones into a well. Ria heard them hit bottom, heard the splash, felt the ripples spread out and out and out until they touched every corner of the life she'd been living for the last decade. I don't understand, she said, but that was a lie. She understood perfectly. She just couldn't afford to understand. Yes, you do. Dane's voice was quiet. You've always known. We've both known. Since before Jake got sick, since before you even married him, we've known there was something between us that shouldn't be there. No. The word came out too fast. No, you're wrong. I loved Jake. I loved him and I married him and we were happy. I know you were. Dane didn't move, but somehow he seemed closer. I'm not saying you didn't love him. I'm saying there was something else there too. Something we both chose to ignore because Jake was your husband and my best friend, and ignoring it was the only decent thing to do. Stop talking. I can't. He ran a hand through his hair, frustrated, exhausted. I've been quiet for 10 years. I kept the promise. I stayed away in every way that mattered. I helped you because he asked me to, but I never crossed the line. Never let you see, he laughed, sharp and bitter. Never let you see that every time I fixed your fence or pulled a calf or kept your equipment running, I was dying inside because it meant I got to be near you for a few hours, and it was the closest I'd ever get to what I actually wanted. Dane, you asked me what you're running from. He met her eyes, unflinching. You're running from this. From the possibility that maybe, just maybe, there's still something here worth staying for. Something that has nothing to do with Jake, or promises, or obligation. Ria's legs felt weak. She gripped the edge of the table. You need to leave. I will, but first you need to understand something. He took a step closer. Just one. It felt like an earthquake. I'm not asking you to stay because Jake told me to watch out for you. I'm not asking because I think you owe me something. I'm asking because in 10 years of watching you slowly disappear, I've realized that losing you, really losing you, not just keeping you at arm's length, is something I can't survive. That's not fair. Her voice came out hoarse. You can't put this on me. You can't make me responsible for... I'm not making you responsible for anything. I'm just telling you the truth. He set his hat back on his head, and the gesture felt final. You want to sell and leave? Fine. Sign the contract. Run away to wherever you think will hurt less than here. But don't lie to yourself about why you're doing it. Don't tell yourself it's about money or debt or honoring Jake's memory. You're leaving because staying means facing the fact that the life you thought you were supposed to have is gone, and something else, something you never planned for and don't know how to handle, might be possible if you're brave enough to reach for it. I'm not brave. The words came out small, true. You're the bravest person I know. Dane's smile was sad, crooked. You just don't see it because you've spent so long being strong that you forgot strength and bravery aren't the same thing. He walked to the door, and Ria's chest felt like it was caving in. This was it. He was leaving. In a few weeks, she'd sign the closing papers, and by summer, she'd be gone. She'd never have to see those blue eyes again, never have to feel this terrible, aching pull towards something she had no right to want. It would be easier, safer. So why did it feel like dying? Dane. His name came out without permission. He stopped, hand on the door frame, but didn't turn around. Why didn't you say something before? She asked. If there was something, why wait until now? His shoulders rose and fell. Because I made a promise to a dying man. And because I thought, he laughed quietly. I thought if I just waited long enough, maybe you'd figure it out on your own. Maybe you'd see what was right in front of you and choose it yourself. But you're choosing to run instead, and I can't... His voice roughened. I can't watch you disappear without at least trying to stop it. Even though it means breaking your promise to Jake? Jake's dead, Ria. He turned then, and the rawness in his face nearly broke her. He's been dead for 10 years, and I'm tired of living my life around a promise I made to a ghost. I'm tired of pretending I don't feel what I feel. I'm tired of being noble and decent and everything I'm supposed to be when what I actually want is to cross this room and... He stopped, swallowed hard. And what? The words came out barely above a whisper. And show you that staying isn't about obligation or debt or maintaining something that's already gone. It's about building something new, something that's ours, not his, not a ghost's, ours. The contract sat on the table between them. $3.2 million. A fresh start. An escape from 10 years of grief and guilt and slow suffocation. All she had to do was sign. Ria looked at Dane, standing in her doorway with his heart cracked open, and felt the careful walls she'd built start to crumble. I don't know how to do this, she said. Do what? Want something again. Want anything. I've spent so long just surviving, just putting one foot in front of the other, that I don't remember how to actually live. Tears were burning in her eyes now. She blinked them back furiously. And I don't know if I'm strong enough to learn. You don't have to be strong. Dane's voice was gentle. You just have to be willing. Willing to what? Betray my husband's memory? Spit on everything we built together? Willing to let yourself be happy again. Willing to believe that maybe, just maybe, grief doesn't have to be the rest of your story. The tears spilled over. She scrubbed at them angrily, hating the weakness, hating that he was seeing her like this. What if I sign it anyway? What if I take the money and leave? Then I'll let you go. Simple. Final. I'll let you go and I'll spend the rest of my life wondering what might have happened if you'd stayed. And if I don't sign, She couldn't finish the sentence, couldn't make herself say the words out loud because that would make it real, and real meant terrifying. If you don't sign, Dane said carefully, then we figure it out, together. No promises to dead men, no obligations, just you and me and whatever this thing is between us that we've both been too scared to name. I'm terrified, she whispered. Me too. What if we're wrong? What if there's nothing there and we blow up both our lives for nothing? What if we're right? His eyes held hers. What if there's everything there and we let it slip away because we were too afraid to try? Ria looked at the contract. looked at Dane, looked at the life she'd been living, half alive, half asleep, going through the motions of existing without ever really feeling anything. Then she looked at the pen in her hand and made a choice. She walked past Dane out onto the porch. The wind hit her like a fist, cold and sharp and clean. Wyoming in March, brutal and beautiful. She'd hated it for so long, hated the way it demanded everything and gave back only what you could wrestle from its grip. But standing there, feeling the wind scour her face, she realized something. She wasn't ready to let it go. Wasn't ready to trade these hard, harsh miles for something soft and easy. Wasn't ready to run from the only home she'd ever known just because staying hurt. "Rhea." Dane's voice behind her, uncertain. She turned to face him. "I need time." "How much time?" "I don't know. The contract gives them 90 days to close. I have," she did the math, "I have 2 weeks to decide if I'm going through with it or backing out." 2 weeks? He nodded slowly. "What happens in those 2 weeks?" "I figure out if I'm brave enough to stay, if there's anything here worth fighting for." She met his eyes. "If you and I are possible, or if we're just two lonely people making a mistake. That's fair?" He stepped off the porch, and she felt the distance like a physical thing. "For what it's worth, I don't think we're a mistake." "You're biased." "Maybe. Or maybe I've just been watching you for 10 years and I know exactly what I'm asking for." He settled his hat lower against the wind. 2 weeks, Rhea. Figure it out. But know this. Whatever you decide, I'm not going anywhere. I'll be right next door, same as I've been for the last decade. And if you choose to leave, I'll help you pack. But if you choose to stay..." He didn't finish. Didn't need to. The promise hung in the air between them, unspoken but absolute. Rhea watched him walk back to his truck, watched him drive away down the rutted road that separated their properties. When his taillights disappeared over the rise, she went back inside. The contract sat on the table where she'd left it. She picked it up, smoothed out the wrinkles, and set it carefully aside. Then she did something she hadn't done in 10 years. She pulled out the old ranch ledgers, not the current ones with their columns of red ink and mounting debt, but the ones from before, from when Jake was alive and they were building something together. From when the future was a tangible thing, full of possibility. She spread them across the table and started to read. Somewhere in these pages was the blueprint for what they'd been trying to create. Somewhere in the careful notations and projected yields and breeding schedules was the dream they'd shared. And somewhere in her chest was the question that mattered most. Was that dream worth saving? Or was it time to dream something new? She didn't know yet, but she had 2 weeks to figure it out. Outside, the wind screamed across the flats, indifferent to her struggle. The land would still be here tomorrow, and the day after, and the day after that. It didn't care who owned it or what promises had been made or broken. It just was. Maybe that was the only truth that mattered. The ledgers told a story Rhea had forgotten she knew. She sat at the kitchen table until past midnight, reading through Jake's handwriting, precise block letters that marched across the pages in neat columns. He'd been meticulous about record keeping, noting everything from feed costs to vaccination schedules to the exact date each calf hit market weight. The early years showed promise. Small profits, steady growth, plans sketched in the margins for expanding the herd, improving grazing rotation, maybe adding a few quarter horses for breeding. Then the entries started to thin, longer gaps between updates. The handwriting got looser, less careful. By the last year of his life, whole months were blank. She'd been the one to fill in those blanks after he died, trying to maintain what he'd started. But her entries were different, reactive instead of planned, focused on survival instead of growth. She could see it now, looking at the progression of her own handwriting as it became more cramped, more desperate, chasing smaller and smaller margins until there were no margins left. When had she stopped trying to build and started just trying to hang on? The clock on the wall ticked past 1. She should sleep. Morning came early on a ranch, always had, always would. But she kept reading, kept searching for the moment when everything had gone wrong. She didn't find it. There was no single catastrophe, no clear turning point. Just a slow accumulation of small losses, a bad calving season, equipment that broke at the wrong time, market prices that dipped when she needed them high. Death by 1,000 cuts, so gradual she hadn't noticed she was bleeding out until it was almost too late. Her phone buzzed. She almost ignored it, then saw the name on the screen. Dane. The text was short. "You still up?" She stared at it for a long moment before typing back. Unfortunately. 3 dots appeared, disappeared, appeared again. Finally, "Want company? I've got a thermos of coffee that's too good to drink alone." Every reasonable part of her brain said no. It was late. She was emotionally raw. Having Dane Holloway in her kitchen at 1 in the morning was the opposite of maintaining boundaries or thinking clearly about her situation. She texted back, "Give me 5 minutes." He was there in 3, because of course he was. His ranch bordered hers on the western side, close enough that she could see his lights on clear nights, close enough that he probably saw hers too and knew exactly when she was burning midnight oil over problems she couldn't solve. "Couldn't sleep either?" she asked when she opened the door. "Sleep's overrated." He had the thermos in one hand and 2 mugs hooked in the fingers of the other. "Thought you might need this more than I do." The coffee was good, strong and black with just a hint of cinnamon, the way Jake used to make it. The similarity hit her like a slap, and she must have made a face because Dane noticed. "Sorry," he said quietly. "I wasn't thinking. I can make it different." "No." She wrapped her hands around the mug, using the heat to anchor herself. "It's fine. It's good, actually. Just been a long time since anyone made me coffee in the middle of the night." They sat across from each other at the table, the ledger spread between them like evidence at a crime scene. Dane picked up one of the older ones, flipped through it carefully. "Jake was always better at the paperwork than I was," he said. "My records looked like a drunk chicken walked through ink and then had a seizure on the page." Despite everything, Rhea almost smiled. "They're not that bad." "Liar." He set the ledger down. "But I appreciate the attempt at kindness." His eyes went to the contract still sitting where she'd left it. "You been staring at that all night?" "No, I've been staring at these." She gestured at the ledgers, trying to figure out where it all went wrong. "Did you find it?" "I found a lot of small wrongs. No big one. Just time and bad luck, and me not being good enough at this to make it work alone." "That's not fair to yourself." "It's accurate." She took a sip of coffee, felt it burn all the way down. Jake knew what he was doing. He grew up on this land. His father taught him. His grandfather taught his father. It's in his blood. Me? I grew up in Casper. My dad sold insurance. What I know about ranching I learned from books and Jake and a whole lot of expensive mistakes. You've kept this place running for 10 years. I've kept it barely breathing for 10 years. There's a difference. She met his eyes across the table. "You know there's a difference." Dane was quiet for a moment, turning his mug in slow circles. "What if you didn't have to do it alone?" "We've been over this. I'm not taking any more help from you." "I'm not talking about help. I'm talking about partnership." The word hung in the air between them, heavy with implications. "I don't understand," Rhea said carefully. "We merge the operations." Dane leaned forward, and she could see he'd been thinking about this, planning it. "Your 800 acres plus my 650. We run it together. Pool resources, split costs, make decisions jointly. It's big enough to be viable, especially if we diversify. Maybe add some hay production, lease out part of it for hunting in the fall." "You're talking about a business partnership." "I'm talking about survival." He paused. "For both of us. You think you're the only one barely hanging on? I lost half my infrastructure in that fire 6 years back. Insurance covered some of it, but not enough. I've been running on hope and stubbornness ever since." Rhea blinked. "I didn't know that." "Because I didn't tell anyone. Same reason you didn't tell anyone how bad things were here." His smile was wry. "Pride's a hell of a thing, isn't it? So we're both drowning. We're both treading water. But together. Together we might actually swim." It made sense. Too much sense. The kind of sense that made her nervous because it sounded like hope, and hope was dangerous. Hope was what got you hurt when things fell apart. "What about the other thing?" she asked quietly. "What other thing?" "What you said earlier about, feelings." The word felt ridiculous in her mouth, like something a teenager would say. You can't tell me you could work alongside me every day, make business decisions together, and not have that complicate everything. Dane was quiet for a long moment. You're right, it would complicate things. So it's a bad idea. I didn't say that. He set his mug down, met her eyes. I said it would complicate things. Complicated doesn't mean bad. It just means we'd have to be honest with each other, clear about boundaries, professional where we need to be professional, and what? And open to the possibility of something more if that's what we both want. He held up a hand before she could protest. I'm not asking for anything right now. I'm not demanding some kind of answer about us. I'm just saying, if we're going to do this, we do it with our eyes open. No pretending there's nothing between us. No more silence. Ria's heart was doing something complicated in her chest. I don't know if I can do that. Why not? Because pretending has been easier, safer. Safer than what? Than admitting that sometimes... She stopped, swallowed hard. That sometimes when you show up to help with something, I'm not thinking about fence repair or cattle. I'm thinking about how you smell like wood smoke and how your hands look when you're working and how your voice sounds when you're tired. And I hate myself for thinking it because Jake's only been gone 10 years. And what kind of person? A human person. Dane's voice was gentle. A person who's been lonely and grieving and trying so hard to do the right thing that you forgot you're allowed to want something for yourself. It feels like betrayal. I know, but it's not. He reached across the table, stopped just short of touching her hand. Jake wouldn't want you to spend the rest of your life punishing yourself. He loved you. He wanted you to be happy. How do you know that? Because he told me. That last day when he asked me to look after you, he said, don't let her turn into a monument to me. Don't let her forget she's alive. Dane's voice roughened. I think about that a lot, about how badly I failed at that particular promise. Ria felt tears burning again. She'd cried more in the last 12 hours than she had in years. You didn't fail. Didn't I? Look at you. Working yourself to death. Running from anything that might make you feel something. That's not living. That's just existing. And you think a business partnership is going to fix that? No. But I think making a choice, any choice, that's about building instead of just surviving, might be a start. He finally bridged the gap, let his fingers touch hers. Just barely. Just enough to send electricity up her arm. What do you say? Take the weekend to think about it. Don't sign that contract yet. Just think about what it might look like if you stayed. The developers aren't going to wait forever. If I back out, they'll move on. There might not be another offer. Then you'll figure something else out. We'll figure something else out. His hand was warm over hers now, solid and real. But you can't make a decision this big out of panic and exhaustion. You owe yourself at least a few days to consider all the options. He was right. She knew he was right. But taking time meant sitting with uncertainty, and uncertainty felt like drowning. Still, what choice did she have? Okay, she said finally. I'll think about it. That's all I'm asking. Dane squeezed her hand once, then let go, and the absence felt like cold water. Now get some sleep. You look dead on your feet. Gee, thanks. I'm a truth teller. It's one of my best qualities. He stood, collected his thermos. I'll come by Monday morning. We can walk the land together. Talk through what a merger might actually look like in practical terms. Sound good? Sounds terrifying. Most good things are. He paused at the door. You know what the difference is between you and me? What? You think you're not strong enough to handle this. I know you are. He settled his hat on his head. See you Monday, Ria. After he left, she sat at the table for another hour, staring at the ledgers and the contract and trying to see a future that didn't feel like slow suicide. The problem was, she'd gotten so used to the weight of grief that she didn't know who she was without it. For 10 years, being Jake's widow had been her entire identity. Being the woman who was bravely carrying on alone, keeping his legacy alive, honoring his memory through sheer, stubborn determination. If she let that go, if she admitted she wanted something different, something more, who would she be? The question kept her awake until dawn. By Saturday afternoon, the whole county knew she was thinking about backing out of the sale. Small towns were like that. Information traveled faster than wildfire, carried on the wind of gossip and speculation. Rhea made the mistake of going into town for supplies, and the look she got at the feed store made it clear the news had spread. Martha Preston, who ran the cash register, couldn't quite meet her eyes. "Heard you might be staying after all." "Where'd you hear that?" "Oh, people talk." Martha rang up the grain supplements with aggressive efficiency. "Seems like a shame to back out of a deal that good. $3 million, that's life-changing money." "It's complicated." "I'm sure it is." The tone said Martha thought it was anything but complicated. Though I suppose if Dane Holloway's involved, things do tend to get complicated. Rhea's spine went straight. "Excuse me?" "Nothing. Just saying." Martha bagged the supplements. "Will that be all?" "That'll be all." Outside, Rhea loaded the bags into her truck with more force than necessary. Her hands were shaking. She hated that they were shaking, hated that Martha Preston's insinuations had gotten under her skin so easily. "Don't let Martha get to you." The voice came from behind her. She turned to find Claire Donovan leaning against a truck 2 spaces over. Claire ran the neighboring ranch to the south, had been widowed young herself, understood things most people didn't. She's been bitter since her own husband ran off with that dental hygienist from Laramie. Makes her see scandal everywhere. "There's no scandal. I know that. You know that. But people are going to talk anyway." Claire pushed off the truck, came closer. "Can I give you some unsolicited advice?" "Can I stop you?" "Not really." Claire's smile was sympathetic. "Whatever you decide about the sale, make sure you're deciding for yourself. Not because of what the town thinks. Not because of what you think you owe Jake's memory, for yourself." "That's what everyone keeps telling me." "Because it's true. And because—" Claire hesitated. "Look, I know what it's like. After Tom died, I felt like I had to maintain this image of the grieving widow, had to prove I could handle everything alone, had to show the world I didn't need anyone." "How'd that work out?" "Miserably. I was lonely and exhausted and slowly going crazy." Claire glanced back at the feed store. "Then I met someone, a good man, and I spent 6 months agonizing over whether it was too soon, whether people would judge me, whether I was disrespecting Tom's memory. You know what finally made me stop?" "What?" "I realized Tom was dead and I wasn't, and that the only person's opinion that mattered was my own." She touched Rhea's arm briefly. "Whatever's happening between you and Dane, and I'm not asking, it's none of my business, just remember that you're allowed to be happy. Even if it's messy, even if it's complicated, even if it's not what you planned." Before Rhea could respond, Claire headed back to her own truck, leaving Rhea standing in the parking lot with a lump in her throat and the uncomfortable feeling that everyone could see straight through her. The weekend crawled by. Rhea tried to focus on ranch work. There was always something that needed doing, but her mind kept spinning, chewing over possibilities like a dog with a bone. She could sell, take the money, disappear to somewhere with an ocean and no memories and start over completely. It would be clean, final, safe. Or she could stay, merge with Dane's operation, risk everything on the possibility that together they might build something viable. Risk her heart on the possibility that what she felt when he was around wasn't just loneliness or grief or misplaced gratitude. The problem was figuring out which option terrified her more. Sunday morning found her on the North Ridge, looking out over the land that had been in Jake's family for 5 generations. The view was spectacular, rolling grassland that swept down to the creek, then climbed again toward the mountains. On clear days, you could see all the way to the peaks, snow-capped and eternal. Jake had loved this spot. They'd come up here on horseback that first summer they were married, spread out a blanket and watched the sunset. He told her stories about his grandfather, about the winter of '49 when they'd lost half the herd to cold, about his father's stubbornness, his mother's quiet strength, about how this land got into your blood until you couldn't imagine being anywhere else. She'd understood it then, in theory, but it wasn't until now, standing here alone, facing the possibility of losing it forever, that she really felt it. The way the wind smelled like sage and snow, the way the light changed every hour, painting the hills in different shades of gold and amber. The way the silence was so complete you could hear your own heartbeat. This was home. Not the house. Not the buildings. The land itself. Could she really walk away from it? Her phone buzzed. Text from Dane. Still on for tomorrow morning? She typed back before she could overthink it. Yes. 9 a.m.? Perfect. I'll bring breakfast. She pocketed the phone and stood there a while longer, watching shadows creep across the valley as the sun climbed higher. Somewhere down there, Dane was probably doing the same thing she was, looking at his land, calculating costs and benefits, trying to figure out if partnership was brilliant or insane. The difference was, he seemed to have already decided. She was still stuck in the deciding. A hawk circled overhead, riding thermals, hunting. Rhea watched it drift in lazy spirals, patient and focused. It would stay up there for hours if necessary, waiting for the right moment to strike. Maybe that was the problem. She'd been so focused on surviving that she'd forgotten about patience, about waiting for the right moment instead of just reacting to crisis after crisis. Maybe it was time to stop reacting and start choosing. Monday morning came too fast. Rhea was up before dawn, nerves jangling like loose wire. She changed clothes 3 times before giving up and going with work jeans and a flannel shirt that had seen better days. This was a business meeting. Sort of. The outfit didn't matter. She told herself that right up until Dane's truck pulled into the drive at 8:55 and her stomach did something complicated. He'd brought breakfast as promised, thermoses of coffee and a bag from Betty's diner that smelled like heaven. Biscuits and gravy, bacon, the hash browns that Betty made with real potatoes and enough butter to stop a heart. "You trying to kill me?" Rhea asked, peering into the bag. "I'm trying to soften you up." Dane grinned. "Is it working?" "Maybe." They ate on the porch, watching the sun burn off the last of the morning fog. The food was good, too good, the kind of comfort that made you remember why living was worth the effort. Dane ate like a man who'd skipped dinner, methodical and focused, and Rhea found herself watching his hands again. "Stop it," she told herself. "Focus." "So," Dane said when they'd finished, "want to walk the fence line? See what we're actually talking about combining?" "Sure." They took his truck to the western boundary where their properties met at a barbed wire fence that had been there longer than either of them had been alive. The posts were weathered gray, some leaning at angles that defied physics. Rhea had meant to fix this section for 3 years, hadn't had the time or money or energy. "This'll need replacing," Dane said, testing a post that wobbled under his hand. "Everything needs replacing." "Not everything. The land's good. Water rights are solid. The bones are there." He looked at her. "We just need to shore up the structure." They walked in silence for a while, following the fence north. Rhea tried to see the land the way Dane must see it, as potential instead of burden, as possibility instead of obligation. "If we did this," she said finally, "if we merged operations, how would it work? Legally, I mean. We'd need to talk to a lawyer, set up an LLC probably, with both of us as equal partners. Draw up an operating agreement that covers decision-making, profit sharing, what happens if one of us wants out." "You've thought about this. I've thought about almost nothing else since the day I heard you were selling." He stopped, turned to face her. "I know it's fast. I know you need time. But Rhea, I've been thinking about this in one form or another for 10 years. The only thing that's changed is I finally worked up the courage to say it out loud." Courage or desperation? Maybe both. His smile was crooked. "Does it matter?" "I don't know. Maybe." She kicked at a tuft of grass. "What if it doesn't work? The partnership, I mean. What if we try it and 6 months in we realize we made a huge mistake? Then we dissolve the LLC and split the assets. It's not ideal, but it's doable." "That's not what I'm asking." Dane studied her. "What are you asking?" "I'm asking what happens to us. If the business fails and we've let this other thing, whatever it is, develop in the meantime, if we've crossed lines we can't uncross, then we deal with it like adults." He stepped closer. "Look, I'm not going to pretend this isn't complicated. It is. But I'd rather have complicated and honest than simple and dishonest. I'd rather risk failing at something real than succeed at maintaining the status quo. The status quo keeps me safe. The status quo is killing you." His voice was gentle but firm. "I've watched you slowly disappear for 10 years. I'm not watching it anymore. If you want to sell and leave, fine. I'll accept that. But if you stay all the way. No half measures, no hiding behind grief or obligation. You stay and you fight for what you want. What if I don't know what I want? Then we figure it out together. He reached out, tucked a strand of hair behind her ear. The gesture was so casual, so intimate, that it stole her breath. That's what partnership means. His hand lingered near her face. She could feel the warmth of it, could smell the coffee on his breath, could see the flecks of gold in those two blue eyes. All she had to do was lean in, close the distance, stop thinking, and just feel. Instead, she stepped back. "I need more time," she said. Something flickered in his expression. Disappointment, maybe, or resignation? But he nodded. "How much time?" "End of the week. I'll give you an answer Friday." "About the partnership or about us?" "Both." "Neither." "I don't know." She wrapped her arms around herself. "I just need to think." "Okay." He stepped back, giving her space. "Friday it is." They walked back to the truck in silence. The easy comfort from breakfast was gone, replaced by something tense and uncertain. Rhea hated it. Hated that she kept pulling away every time he got close. Hated that she couldn't just make a decision and stick with it. But more than that, she hated that part of her wanted to close the distance he'd just created. Wanted to call him back and say yes to everything. The partnership, the possibility, the risk. She didn't, though. Because wanting something and being brave enough to reach for it were two very different things. And she still didn't know which kind of person she was. Friday came too fast and not fast enough. Rhea spent the week in a state of suspended animation, going through the motions of ranch work while her mind spun in circles. Every time she thought she'd made a decision, doubt crept back in. Every time she convinced herself to sign the contract and run, she'd see Dane fixing something on his side of the fence, and her resolve would crumble. Wednesday afternoon, she found herself at the county clerk's office, ostensibly to check property records. Really, she was looking at the historical documents for both ranches, hers and Dane's. The Callahan family had owned their land since 1887, the Holloways since 1892. Over a century of history, two families side by side, weathering droughts and depressions and wars. Looking for something specific? The clerk, a woman named Linda who'd gone to school with Jake, peered over reading glasses. "Just curious about the history." "Both properties?" Linda's eyebrow went up. "Heard you and Dane Holloway are talking about merging operations." Of course she'd heard. In a county with more cattle than people, gossip traveled at the speed of light. "We're discussing options," Rhea said carefully. "Good. About time someone stood up to those developers." Linda pulled out another ledger. "You know the Callamans and Holloways almost merged once before?" "Back in the 30s during the Dust Bowl. Got as far as drawing up papers, then something fell through." "But what happened?" "Pride, probably. Or fear. People get in their own way sometimes." Linda slid the ledger across the counter. "Here. You can see the preliminary filing. Never got finalized." Rhea looked at the faded handwriting, her great-grandfather's name next to Dane's grandfather's. They'd been trying to survive together even then. Why hadn't it worked? "Thanks," she said, pushing the ledger back. "Rhea?" Linda's voice stopped her at the door. "Whatever you decide, make sure it's what you actually want, not what you think you should want. Life's too short for should." Back at the ranch, Rhea couldn't stop thinking about that almost merger from 90 years ago. Two families who'd seen the logic of combining forces but couldn't make it work. Was she about to repeat history? Or was she finally going to be brave enough to break the pattern? Thursday morning brought unexpected visitors. A truck pulled into her drive around 10, and Rhea's stomach dropped when she recognized Carson Mitchell, Western Horizon's representative, climbing out. She met him on the porch, arms crossed. "You need to leave. My lawyer said..." "But I know what your lawyer said." Mitchell held up his hands. "I'm not here to pressure you. I'm here to make a final offer. I already backed out of the sale. And we could sue. Probably would win too. You signed a letter of intent. We've got documented expenses." He pulled out a folder. "But litigation is expensive and time-consuming for everyone. So here's what we're willing to do. We'll increase the offer to 3.8 million, cover all your closing costs, and give you 6 months to vacate instead of 90 days. Gadsit Fararits, 3.8 million. More money than she'd ever imagined having. Why? She asked. Because we need this property. It's the linchpin of our entire development plan. Without it, we've got 1,400 scattered acres that aren't worth nearly as much. Mitchell set the folder on the porch rail. This is a good offer, Mrs. Callahan. Maybe the last good offer you'll see. I need to think about it. You've got until tomorrow at 5 p.m. After that, we're moving to litigation. He tipped his hat and left. Rhea stood on the porch holding the folder, feeling like the ground had just shifted under her feet. 3.8 million. That was generational wealth. That was security for the rest of her life. That was also blood money, paid to destroy everything Jake's family had built. She was still standing there when Dane's truck appeared over the rise. He took one look at her face and killed the engine. What happened? She handed him the folder, watched his expression darken as he read. They're trying to buy you off, he said finally. It's working. Rhea, 3.8 million, Dane. Do you understand how much money that is? I could pay off every debt, set up a trust, live anywhere I wanted. I'd never have to worry about money again. And you'd spend the rest of your life knowing you sold out, knowing you let them win because you were scared. His voice was hard. Is that really what you want? I don't know what I want. The words exploded out of her. That's the problem. I don't know if staying is brave or stupid. I don't know if fighting is worth it or if I'm just being stubborn. I don't know if what I feel for you is real or if I'm just lonely and desperate and you're convenient. The last sentence hung in the air like smoke after a gunshot. Dane's face went very still. Convenient. I didn't mean... Yes, you did. He handed the folder back. You know what? Take the money, sign the papers, run away to wherever you think will hurt less. Because clearly I've been kidding myself thinking you actually wanted this. That's not fair. Fair? You just called our entire relationship convenient. You just reduced everything between us to proximity and loneliness. His voice was shaking now. I laid my heart out for you. I told you I've been in love with you for 10 years, and you think that's convenience. I'm scared. The admission tore out of her. I'm terrified that I'm making decisions based on emotion instead of logic. I'm terrified that if I choose you and the ranch and fighting Western Horizons, I'll lose everything. And I'm terrified that I'm not strong enough to survive losing everything again. So you're going to choose to lose everything on your own terms instead? Dane shook his head. That's just running with extra steps. Then tell me what to do. She was crying now, hot tears of frustration. Tell me what the right choice is because I can't see it anymore. I can't tell you what to do. This has to be your choice. He stepped off the porch. But I'll tell you this. If you take that money and leave, I'll understand. I won't like it, but I'll understand. And I'll help you pack, and I'll wave goodbye, and I'll spend the rest of my life wondering what might have been if you'd been brave enough to stay. And if I stay? If you stay? He turned back, and the raw hope in his face nearly broke her. If you stay, we fight Western Horizons together. We build this ranch into something neither of us could manage alone. We figure out what this thing between us actually is without running from it. And maybe we get to be happy. No guarantees, just possibility. Possibility isn't certainty. No, it's not. But it's better than regret. He climbed into his truck. You've got until tomorrow to decide. Whatever you choose, I meant what I said. I love you. That doesn't change whether you stay or go. He drove away, and Rhea collapsed onto the porch steps, sobbing like she hadn't let herself sob since Jake's funeral. 10 years of grief and loneliness and fear came pouring out, and she couldn't stop it. When she finally ran dry, she went inside and did something she hadn't done in years. She pulled out the box of Jake's things from the back of the closet, the box she'd packed after he died and never opened again. His wallet, still carrying the photos he'd kept of them. His favorite belt buckle, one at a rodeo when he was 19, the watch his father had given him. And at the bottom, a letter. Rhea's hand shook as she unfolded it. Jake's handwriting, familiar as her own. Rhea, if you're reading this, I'm gone. The doctor told me yesterday that the headaches are an aneurysm and there's nothing they can do. I've got maybe a week, maybe less. I'm writing this while you're in town because I can't say these things to your face without falling apart. I'm sorry. I'm so damn sorry I'm leaving you with this mess. The debt? The ranch. All of it. You deserve better than being left alone to figure everything out. I asked Dane to look after you. Not because I think you can't handle things yourself. You're the strongest person I know. But because I know you'll try to do everything alone, and that's not how life is supposed to work. Here's the thing I need you to understand. I've known for years that Dane's in love with you. He's hidden it well, but I've seen the way he looks at you when he thinks nobody's watching. And I'm not angry about it. How could I be angry that someone else sees what I see? That you're worth loving. What makes me sad is knowing you're going to feel guilty about it. You're going to think that moving on means betraying me. You're going to punish yourself for wanting to be happy again. Don't. Rhea, if you're reading this, I'm dead. You're not. You're alive, and you deserve to live, really live, not just survive. If that means selling the ranch, sell it. If it means leaving Wyoming, leave. If it means building something new with someone else, build it. I loved you with everything I had. That love doesn't require you to stop living when I'm gone. It requires you to live enough for both of us. Be happy, please. That's the only thing I'm asking. Forever yours, Jake. Rhea read the letter 3 times, tears streaming down her face. All these years she'd been carrying guilt that Jake himself had tried to release her from. All these years, she'd been maintaining his legacy when what he actually wanted was for her to build her own life. She'd been so focused on honoring his memory that she'd forgotten to honor his actual wishes. The letter changed everything and nothing. It didn't make the decision easier, but it made the guilt lighter, and that was something. She spent Thursday night on the ridge again, watching stars wheel overhead, trying to find answers in the vastness of the sky. The land stretched away in all directions, dark and quiet, holding the bones of 5 generations of Calanahans. But the land didn't need her to keep it frozen in time. The land would endure whatever came next, whether that was her staying and building something new, or Western Horizons carving it into subdivisions, or some future owner she'd never meet. The land didn't need her, but maybe she needed it. Maybe she needed to stop running from the possibility of loss and start running toward the possibility of gain. Maybe she needed to choose the harder path because easy had gotten her nowhere but exhausted and alone. Maybe she needed to be brave enough to want something again, even if wanting meant risking everything. Friday morning dawned clear and cold, frost sparkling on the grass like diamonds. Rhea woke with her decision made, settled somewhere in her bones during the night while her conscious mind was still spinning. She called Carson Mitchell at 8 a.m. "I'm not signing," she said. "Take your offer and your threats and your lawsuit. I'm keeping my land." Silence. Then, "You're making a mistake." "Maybe, but it's my mistake to make." She hung up before he could respond. The second call was harder. Dane answered on the first ring. "Yeah? Can you come over?" "Give me 10 minutes. He was there in 7, climbing out of his truck with the wariness of someone expecting bad news. Rhea met him on the porch, the Western Horizons folder in her hands. "I called Mitchell," she said. "Told him no." Dane's expression didn't change. "You sure?" "No, but I'm doing it anyway." She held out the folder. "I don't want the money. I don't want to run. I want to stay and fight and build something that's actually mine instead of just maintaining something that belonged to someone else." "Okay." His voice was carefully neutral. "What about the other thing?" "What other thing?" "Us. You said you didn't know if what you felt was real or just convenience." She stepped closer. "I was scared. I am scared. But I've been thinking about what Jake would want and what I want, and they're not mutually exclusive. I can honor his memory and still choose to build a life with you. They're not the same thing, but they're not opposite things either. Rhea, let me finish." She took a breath. "I love you. I don't know when it started. Maybe it's been building for 10 years. Maybe it's newer than that. But it's real. And it's terrifying because loving someone means they can hurt you or leave you or die. And I've already lived through that once, but..." Her voice cracked. "But living without love is worse. I know because I've been doing it for a decade, and I'm done." Dane closed the distance between them in 2 strides, pulled her into his arms, held her like he was afraid she might disappear. "Say it again," he said against her hair. "I love you." Again. "I love you. I'm choosing you. I'm choosing us. I'm choosing to stay." She pulled back enough to see his face. "I'm choosing the hard thing because the easy thing almost destroyed me." He kissed her then, deep and hungry and full of 10 years of wanting. When they broke apart, both breathing hard, he rested his forehead against hers. "You know they're probably going to sue," he said. "Let them sue. We'll fight it. You know the whole town's going to have opinions about us. They already do. Let them talk. You know this is going to be hard. The ranch, the legal battle, figuring out how to be together after all this time." "I know," she smiled. "I'm not afraid of hard anymore. I'm afraid of empty, and life without you, without this land, without taking the risk. That would be empty." "So we're really doing this? Partnership and everything that comes with it? We're really doing this." She pulled him toward the house. "Now come inside. We've got a lot of planning to do if we're going to merge 2 ranches and fight a corporation and figure out how to run a business while being—" She paused. "What are we exactly?" "Happy," Dane said. "We're happy. We can figure out the rest as we go." And for the first time in 10 years, standing in her kitchen with Dane's hand in hers and a future that was uncertain but chosen, Rhea Callahan believed that happiness was actually possible. Not the easy kind, not the kind that came without work or risk or the daily choice to keep showing up, but the real kind, built on honesty and partnership and the courage to want something more than just survival. The kind worth fighting for. The lawsuit arrived on a Thursday morning, delivered by a process server who looked apologetic about the whole thing. Rhea stood on her porch holding the papers, reading the same paragraph over and over until the words stopped making sense. Western Horizons Development Corporation was suing her for breach of contract, demanding specific performance or damages in the amount of $4.6 million. 4.6. Nearly $1.5 million more than the original sale price. Her hands went numb. "Ma'am?" The process server was still standing there, young enough to have acne scars on his jawline. "You okay? You need me to call someone?" "I'm fine." The words came out automatic. She wasn't fine. She was the opposite of fine. But you didn't fall apart in front of strangers in Wyoming. That wasn't how things worked. The kid left, and Rhea went inside on legs that felt like water. She set the papers on the kitchen table, the same table where she'd almost signed the original contract, where she'd sat with Dane and talked about partnership, where she'd made the decision that had seemed so brave 2 weeks ago and now felt catastrophically stupid. Her phone was in her hand before she consciously decided to call him. Dane answered on the second ring. "Hey, I was just about to—" "They're suing me." Her voice sounded strange, too high and thin. "Western Horizons. They're suing me for $4.6 million. Silence. Then, "I'm coming over. You don't have to—" "I'm already in the truck." He was there in less than 10 minutes, boots pounding up the porch steps, bursting through the door like the place was on fire. His eyes went straight to hers, then to the papers on the table. "Let me see." She watched him read, watched his jaw get tighter with each page. When he finished, he set the papers down very carefully, like they might explode. "Okay," he said. "Okay. This is bad, but it's not the end of the world." "They want $4.6 million, Dane. I don't have $4.6. If they win this, they're not going to win. You don't know that. I know you had every right to back out of that contract. You were within the cancellation window. Their own paperwork says you had 14 days to withdraw without penalty. Then why are they suing?" "Because they're pissed and they're trying to scare you into settling." He pulled out his phone. "We need a lawyer, a good one. I can't afford a good lawyer." "Then we'll find one who takes contingency cases, or we'll—" He stopped, looked at her. "We'll figure it out. Together. That's what partnership means, remember?" The partnership. Right. They'd signed the papers 3 days after that conversation in the pasture. Made it official. Callahan Holloway Ranch, LLC, equal partners, joint ownership of 1,450 acres. Her lawyer had warned her it was fast, maybe too fast, But she'd signed anyway because the alternative was losing everything to Western Horizons or watching it all get sold off piece by piece to cover debts. Now she was dragging Dane down with her. "This isn't your problem," she said. "The hell it isn't. We're partners now. Your problems are my problems." He was already scrolling through contacts on his phone. "I know a guy in Cheyenne, corporate lawyer, but he's good. Let me see if he can recommend someone." While Dane made calls, Rhea read through the lawsuit again, forcing herself to actually comprehend it this time. The language was dense, full of legal terms she didn't understand, but the core argument was clear. Western Horizons claimed they'd already invested substantial resources in the development based on her signed letter of intent. They'd conducted environmental surveys, filed preliminary permits, secured financing. Her withdrawal had caused irreparable harm to their business interests. She wanted to throw up. "Got someone." Dane ended his call, scribbled a name on a piece of paper. "Angela Reeves. She's in Casper, specializes in contract disputes. My buddy says she's tough, and she doesn't back down from corporate bullies. He's calling her now, giving her the heads up." "Dane, don't." He looked at her, and the intensity in his face made her throat tight. "Don't tell me this isn't my fight. Don't tell me you can handle it alone. Don't pull that martyrdom routine where you try to protect everyone except yourself. I'm just saying, I know what you're saying, and I'm saying no. We're in this together." He came around the table, pulled out the chair next to hers, sat close enough that their knees touched. "You made a choice to stay. A brave choice. Now they're trying to punish you for it, and I'm not letting that happen." "What if we lose? What if the judge sides with them, and we're on the hook for millions we don't have? Then we appeal, or we declare bankruptcy, or we sell everything and start over somewhere else." He took her hand, laced their fingers together. "But we do it together. You're not alone in this anymore." The thing was, she believed him. That was the terrifying part. Somewhere in the last few weeks, she'd started to actually believe that Dane meant what he said, that he wasn't going to disappear the moment things got hard, but believing something and trusting it were different animals. "I need to think," she said. "About what?" "About whether dragging you into my mess is fair, about whether the partnership was a mistake." His hand tightened on hers. "Don't do that." "Do what?" "Look for an exit. The second things get complicated. That's running, Rhea. That's what you've been doing for 10 years, and it's not working anymore." "I'm not running. I'm being realistic." "You're being scared, which is fine. I'm scared too. But scared and running aren't the same thing." He shifted closer. "Stay. Fight this with me. Let me stand beside you for once, instead of watching you shoulder everything alone." She wanted to. Every cell in her body wanted to lean into him, let him take some of the weight, believe that maybe she didn't have to carry the world solo. But the voice in her head, the one that sounded like every worst fear she'd ever had, whispered that people left. Always. Eventually. Jake had left not by choice but by death, and the result was the same. She'd been alone. Trusting Dane felt like handing him a loaded gun and hoping he wouldn't pull the trigger. "I need some air," she said, pulling her hand free. She walked out before he could stop her, out past the barn and up the ridge where she'd stood that Sunday morning, trying to decide whether to stay or go. The view was the same, endless grassland rolling toward mountains, but everything else had changed. She'd thought choosing to stay was the hard part. Turned out staying was the easy part. Figuring out how to actually live instead of just survive, that was the battle. Her phone buzzed. Text from Claire Donovan. "Heard about the lawsuit. You okay?" Of course Claire had heard. The whole county had probably heard by now. News like this traveled faster than weather. Rhea typed back. "Been better." 3 dots appeared. Then, "Come by tonight. I'm making chili. We can talk strategy." She almost said no, her default response to offers of help, but something made her type. "What time?" 6. "And bring Dane. This affects both of you now." The idea of showing up at Claire's with Dane felt too couple-like, too much like admitting something she wasn't ready to admit. But Claire was right. The lawsuit affected them both. This was business. She texted Dane. "Claire invited us for dinner, 6 p.m. Strategy session about the lawsuit." His response came immediately. I'll drive. Back at the house, she found him still at the kitchen table, laptop open, notepad covered in his chicken scratch handwriting. He looked up when she came in. Angela Reeves called. She can meet with us tomorrow morning, 9 a.m. at her office in Casper. I told her we'd be there. That fast? She cleared her schedule when she heard what Western Horizons is trying to pull. Apparently they've got a reputation for this kind of strong-arm tactic. He closed the laptop. She thinks we've got a good case. The contract had clear withdrawal terms, and you followed them. This lawsuit is basically them hoping you'll settle out of fear. It's working. Only if you let it. He stood, came over to her. Look at me. She did, reluctantly. We're going to fight this, he said, and we're going to win. But I need you to actually be in the fight, not halfway out the door planning your escape route. I don't have an escape route. They're suing me for more money than I'll make in 3 lifetimes. Then we make sure they don't win. His hand settled on her shoulders, warm and steady. I know you're scared. I know every instinct you have is telling you to run or push me away or find some way to handle this solo. But those instincts are wrong. You're not alone, not anymore. She wanted to believe him, wanted it so badly it hurt. What if I let you down? The words came out small. What if I'm not strong enough for this? You are. You've been strong enough to survive 10 years of grief and debt and loneliness. You're sure as hell strong enough to survive a lawsuit from some corporate assholes who think they can bully you into submission. He pulled her closer. And even if you weren't, which you are, you've got me. We're stronger together than we are apart. That's the whole point. Before she could overthink it, before fear could stop her, Rhea leaned forward and rested her forehead against his chest. Just stood there, breathing, letting herself take comfort from another human being for the first time in longer than she could remember. Dane's arms came around her, careful at first, then tighter when she didn't pull away. He smelled like coffee and the outdoors and something uniquely him. His heartbeat was steady under her ear. We're going to be okay, he said quietly. I promise. She wanted to tell him not to make promises he couldn't keep, wanted to protect herself from disappointment, but standing there in his arms, feeling solid and real and present in a way she hadn't felt in years, she thought maybe, just maybe, some promises were worth the risk of believing. Claire's chili was legendary in the county, and she'd outdone herself tonight. The kitchen smelled like cumin and chiles and cornbread, and despite everything, Rhea's stomach growled. Sit. Claire pointed at the table. Both of you, eat first, talk strategy after. Nobody makes good decisions on an empty stomach. They ate. The chili was perfect, spicy enough to clear sinuses, but not so hot you couldn't taste the depth of flavor underneath. The cornbread was buttery and sweet. Rhea hadn't realized how hungry she was until the food was in front of her. Dane ate like he'd been starving, which made Claire smile. Nice to cook for someone who appreciates it. Most men around here think food just appears on plates through some kind of magic. My mama raised me better than that. Dane helped himself to seconds. She made sure I knew my way around a kitchen before she'd let me leave home. Smart woman. They made small talk through dinner. Cattle prices, weather predictions, the new family that had moved into the old Henderson place. Normal things. Easy things. For a little while, Rhea could almost forget about the lawsuit, the mounting pressure, the fact that her entire future hung in a balance that could tip either way. Then dinner was over and Claire pushed back from the table. Okay, let's talk about Western Horizons. She pulled out a folder, spread papers across the table. Rhea blinked. How did you... I've been dealing with them for 6 months. Claire's expression went hard. They approached me last fall about selling my place, offered good money. I said no. They kept pushing. I kept saying no. Then they started getting nasty, implied I'd regret refusing them, that they had ways of making holdouts reconsider. Dane leaned forward. They threatened you? Not in so many words, but the meaning was clear. She tapped one of the papers. I started keeping records. Every phone call, every conversation, every piece of correspondence. My lawyer said it was probably overkill, but I had a feeling I'd need it eventually. And? Rhea asked. And they're building a case for a master-planned community. Something big. 3,000 homes, retail space, maybe a golf course. They've been quietly buying up properties all over the county, but they need a certain amount of contiguous acreage to make their permits work. Claire looked at Rhea. Your 800 acres is smack in the middle of what they need. Without it, their whole project falls apart. The pieces click together. So they're not just being vindictive, they actually need my land. Exactly. Which means this lawsuit isn't really about damages. It's about forcing your hand, make you so scared of losing everything that you agree to sell just to make it go away. That's extortionate, Dane said. That's business. Claire's smile was grim. Welcome to how developers operate when local governments don't protect agricultural land. Rhea's mind was racing. If they need my property that badly, doesn't that give us leverage? It should, but only if we can prove they're acting in bad faith. Claire pulled out another document. This is where things get interesting. I did some digging, called in a favor from a friend who works in county planning. Turns out Western Horizons filed their preliminary permits 2 weeks before you ever signed that letter of intent. Dane sat up straighter. They were moving forward before they had the land secured? Looks like it, which suggests they were pretty confident they'd get it one way or another. Claire looked at Rhea. Did they ever pressure you during negotiations, make promises about timeline or financing that seemed too good to be true? Rhea thought back. Their rep, guy named Carson Mitchell, he kept saying it was a limited-time offer, that they had other properties they were considering, but mine was their first choice. If I didn't decide fast, they'd move on. Classic pressure tactic. Claire made a note. Anything else? He mentioned they already had investors lined up, made it sound like the deal was basically done, just needed my signature to finalize. She paused. At the time I thought he was just being confident, but now it sounds like they were counting on you signing before you had time to really think about it or get proper legal advice. Dane's jaw was tight. That's not negotiating in good faith. No, it's not. Claire gathered the papers. Take all this to your lawyer tomorrow. Angela Reeves is good. She'll know how to use it. And in the meantime, don't talk to anyone from Western Horizons. No calls, no emails, no conversations. Everything goes through your attorney from now on. Rhea felt something loosen in her chest. For the first time since the process server showed up, she felt like maybe this wasn't completely hopeless. Maybe there was a way through that didn't end in financial ruin. Thank you, she said. I don't know how to... Claire waved her off. We look out for each other out here. That's how it works. She looked between Rhea and Dane, something knowing in her expression. Besides, I've got a vested interest in making sure they don't steamroll you two. If they get your land, they'll come after mine next, and I'm not going anywhere. They left around 9 to... Dane driving because Rhea was too wrung out to focus on the road. The night was clear, stars spread across the sky in a blanket of light that you couldn't see in cities. Wyoming sky. Big enough to make you feel small, beautiful enough to make you grateful for the smallness. You're quiet, Dane said after a few miles. Thinking. About? About how I almost ran from this. From all of it. She looked out at the darkness rushing past. If I'd signed that contract, if I'd sold and left, I would never have known they were planning to bulldoze everything and turn it into subdivisions. I would have just taken the money and convinced myself I was doing the right thing. But you didn't. Only because you pushed me to stay. She turned to look at him. You know that, right? If you hadn't shown up that night and told me I was running, I would have run. I would have signed those papers and been gone before I had time to second guess it. Maybe, or maybe you would have figured it out on your own eventually. He kept his eyes on the road. I'd like to think you're stronger than you give yourself credit for. I don't feel strong. Nobody does. That's the secret they don't tell you. Strength isn't feeling invincible. It's being scared out of your mind and showing up anyway. They pulled into her driveway. Dane put the truck in park but didn't shut off the engine. You coming in? Rhea asked. You want me to? It was a real question, not rhetorical. She could see it in his face. He'd leave if she asked him to, wouldn't push, wouldn't assume. That's what made her say yes. Inside, she made coffee more out of habit than need. Her hands were steadier now. The panic from this morning settled into something manageable. Dane sat at the kitchen table, The same place he'd sat a dozen times before, but tonight it felt different, more permanent, like maybe he belonged there. "Can I ask you something?" She set a mug in front of him. "Anything. Why did you really stay all these years? And don't give me the line about Jake asking you to. I want the real reason." He was quiet for a long moment, turning the mug in slow circles. "You want the truth?" "I want the truth. I stayed because walking away from you would have felt like cutting off a limb." He looked up, met her eyes. "I know that sounds dramatic. I know it probably sounds obsessive or unhealthy or whatever other label people would put on it, but it's the truth. I stayed because being near you, even if it was just as the neighbor who fixed your fences and helped with calving, was better than not being near you at all." Her chest felt too tight. "Dane, let me finish." He stood, came around the table. "I'm not proud of it. I'm not proud that I spent 10 years wanting something I couldn't have, watching you grieve a man who was better than me in every way. I'm not proud that there were nights I hated myself for being glad he was gone, because it meant maybe, someday, you might see me as something other than your dead husband's friend. You think Jake was better than you? I know he was. He was—" Dane's voice roughened. "He was good, genuinely good. He loved you with everything he had. He built you a life here, a home. What did I do? I circled like a vulture waiting for my chance. That's not fair to yourself. Isn't it?" "Jake was good," Rhea said carefully, "but he wasn't perfect. He was stubborn and proud, and sometimes he made decisions without asking me because he assumed he knew best. He loved this land more than he loved me sometimes, and that hurt even though I understood it." She took a breath. "I loved him, I did. But loving someone doesn't mean they were perfect or that you can't—" She stopped. "Can't what?" Dane's voice was quiet. "Can't love someone else too. In a different way. For different reasons." The silence stretched out, loaded with everything they weren't saying. "Are you saying—" Dane started. "I'm saying I'm tired of pretending there's nothing between us." The words came out in a rush. "I'm tired of feeling guilty every time I want to lean on you or be near you or imagine what it might be like if we stopped dancing around this thing and just—" He kissed her. One moment they were standing on opposite sides of an invisible line, and the next his hands were in her hair and his mouth was on hers, and there was no line, no boundary, no reason to hold back. Rhea made a sound, surprise or relief or both, and kissed him back. 10 years of restraint and longing and carefully maintained distance collapsed in an instant. He tasted like coffee and possibility, and when his arms came around her, she fit against him like she'd been designed for exactly this space. They broke apart, breathing hard. Dane rested his forehead against hers. "I've wanted to do that for so long," he said. "Me too." The admission felt like jumping off a cliff. "Yeah? Yeah." She pulled back enough to see his face. "I kept telling myself it was wrong or too soon or disrespectful to Jake's memory, but the truth is, I've been fighting this for years. Fighting you. Fighting myself. Fighting what I felt every time you showed up to help with something and I had to remind myself we were just neighbors. We were never just neighbors. No, we weren't." She touched his face, traced the line of his jaw. "I don't know what happens next. I don't know how to do this, how to want someone again, how to trust that you won't leave or die or disappear, but I'm tired of being scared." "Then don't be." He caught her hand, pressed a kiss to her palm. "Be scared later. Right now, just be here with me." So she was. She let him pull her close again, let herself feel the solid warmth of him, let herself believe that maybe choosing to stay and choosing to let someone in weren't separate decisions but the same one. They stood like that for a long time, holding each other in the quiet kitchen while the clock ticked and the wind rattled the windows. Outside, the land stretched away into darkness, hard and beautiful and unforgiving. But inside, just for this moment, everything felt possible. "We should probably talk about this," Rhea said finally. "Talk about what?" "About us. About what this means. About how we navigate being business partners, and also—" She gestured between them. "Also whatever we are?" "Yeah." Dane considered, what if we don't navigate? What if we just see what happens? That's not a plan. No, it's not, but plans haven't gotten us very far. He smiled. Maybe it's time to try something different, like being honest about what we want instead of what we think we should want. And what do you want? You, this. A chance to see if what we've been feeling for the last decade is real or just loneliness and proximity. He brushed hair back from her face. What do you want? Rhea thought about it, really thought, past the fear and guilt and all the voices in her head telling her this was too fast, too complicated, too much. I want to not be alone anymore, she said. I want to build something instead of just maintaining something that's already dead. I want to wake up in the morning and feel like there's a reason to get out of bed beyond just survival. That's a good list. I want you, she added quietly, even though it scares me, even though I don't know how to do this. I want you anyway. His smile was everything, soft and fierce and absolutely sure. Then you've got me, however you need me, partner, friend, or, she interrupted. Definitely or. He kissed her again, slower this time, deeper. When they finally pulled apart, the kitchen felt different somehow. Brighter, warmer. Like maybe the house itself knew something had shifted. I should probably go, Dane said, but he didn't move. You could stay. Rhea, just asleep. On the couch if you want. She took a breath. I don't want to be alone tonight. Understanding crossed his face. Okay. Yeah, I can stay. They didn't talk much after that. Dane made up the couch with blankets from the hall closet, while Rhea locked up and turned off lights. It felt domestic, comfortable, like they'd done this 1,000 times before instead of this being the first. At her bedroom door, she paused. Thank you for everything, for pushing me to stay, for standing with me against Western Horizons, for loving me, she almost said, but the word stuck. Anytime, he said, like he knew what she couldn't say. Sleep well, Rhea. She did. For the first time in months, maybe years, she slept all the way through without nightmares or waking to stare at the ceiling and mentally calculate debt. She slept knowing that just down the hall, someone who cared about her was standing guard against the darkness. And when morning came with its challenges and uncertainties, at least she wouldn't be facing them alone. Morning came with the smell of coffee and bacon, which was wrong because Rhea hadn't made either. She stumbled out of her bedroom to find Dane in the kitchen, spatula in hand, looking entirely too comfortable at her stove. You cook? She rubbed sleep from her eyes. Told you my mama raised me right. He flipped a piece of bacon. We've got that meeting with Angela Reeves in 2 hours. Figured we should eat first. The meeting, right, the lawsuit. For about 30 seconds after waking, she'd forgotten about Western Horizons and their $4.6 million threat. Reality came crashing back. Dane must have seen it in her face because he said, don't spiral, eat breakfast, take a shower, and let's go deal with this. The food helped. So did the shower. By the time they were in Dane's truck heading toward Casper, Rhea felt almost human, almost ready to face whatever Angela Reeves had to tell them. The lawyer's office was in a converted Victorian house on a tree-lined street that looked nothing like the strip mall law firms Rhea had imagined. Angela Reeves herself was 50-something, gray hair cut short, wearing jeans and a blazer that somehow made the combination look professional. You must be Rhea and Dane. She shook both their hands, grip firm. Come on back. Fair warning, I don't sugarcoat things. You good with that? We're good, Dane said. Angela's office was organized chaos, files stacked on every surface, a whiteboard covered in flowcharts, coffee cups at various stages of abandonment. She cleared 2 chairs, gestured for them to sit. Okay, I've reviewed the contract, the lawsuit, and the materials Claire Donovan sent over. Angela leaned against her desk. First, the good news. Western Horizons doesn't have a strong case for specific performance. The contract had clear withdrawal terms. You followed them to the letter. They can argue damages, but proving actual harm is going to be difficult when they were moving forward before the deal was even finalized. And the bad news? Rhea asked. The bad news is they've got deeper pockets than you do. They can afford to drag this out, rack up legal fees, make your life hell for months or years. Even if we win, the cost of winning might bankrupt you. Angela pulled out a yellow legal pad. So we need to be smart about this. We need leverage. What kind of leverage? The kind that makes them want to settle fast and quiet. She tapped her pen against the pad. Tell me everything about your interactions with Carson Mitchell. Every conversation, every pressure tactic, every promise he made. Rhea walked through it, the initial approach, the escalating calls, the limited time offer that wasn't really limited, the implications that other buyers were waiting in the wings. Dane added details she'd forgotten, times Mitchell had shown up unannounced, the way he'd made the whole thing feel urgent and inevitable. Angela took notes, occasionally asking clarifying questions. When they finished, she sat back. They violated disclosure requirements, she said. Wyoming law requires developers to provide certain information before signing, environmental impact assessments, financing details, zoning status. Did Mitchell give you any of that? He gave me a packet. Rhea tried to remember. It was thick, lots of technical language. I skimmed it, but I didn't really understand most of it. Did it include a notice of your right to independent legal review? I don't think so. Maybe? It was all so overwhelming. Bring me that packet, every piece of paper they gave you. Angela made another note. If they didn't provide proper disclosures, that could invalidate the entire agreement, or at minimum, give us grounds for a countersuit. Countersuit? Dane leaned forward. For what? Fraud, deceptive business practices, intentional infliction of emotional distress. Angela's smile was sharp. If we can prove they deliberately misled Rhea or failed to provide required disclosures, we flip this whole thing around. Suddenly, they're the ones on defense. Hope fluttered in Rhea's chest, tentative and fragile. You think that could work? I think it's worth exploring, but I need to be straight with you. This isn't going to be cheap or easy. My retainer is $10,000. If we go to trial, costs could run $50,000, $75,000, maybe more. The hope collapsed. I don't have that kind of money. We do. Dane's voice was firm. The partnership does. We've got operating capital. We can cover it. Dane, no, I can't ask you to... You're not asking. I'm offering. He looked at Angela. What if we win? Do we recoup costs? If we win and can prove bad faith on their part, yes. We can seek attorney's fees and damages. Angela studied them both. But that's a big if. You need to understand the risk. We understand, Dane said. Do it. File the countersuit or whatever you need to file. We're not backing down. Rhea wanted to argue, wanted to protect him from this mess she'd created, but she could see in his face that arguing would be pointless. He'd made up his mind. They were in this together, whether she liked it or not. All right then. Angela stood, extended her hand. You've got yourself a lawyer. Get me that packet by end of day. I'll start drafting our response, and we'll see about making Western Horizons regret they ever picked this fight. They left with a list of documents to gather and a tentative plan. In the truck, Rhea let her head fall back against the seat. That's a lot of money, she said. It's an investment. Dane started the engine. In the ranch, in our future, in making sure corporate bullies don't get to steamroll people just because they've got deeper pockets. What if we lose? Then we lose. But at least we went down swinging. He glanced at her. You're allowed to fight back, you know. You're allowed to stand up for yourself instead of just taking whatever punishment the universe hands out. Is that what I've been doing? Taking punishment? For 10 years, yeah. You've been acting like Jake's death was somehow your fault and you deserve to suffer for it. His voice was gentle but firm. It wasn't. You don't. And I'm done watching you punish yourself. The words hit harder than they should have. Maybe because they were true. They stopped at Rhea's place to dig through her files for the Western Horizons packet. It took an hour of searching before she found it, shoved in a drawer beneath old tax returns and veterinary records. The packet was exactly as she remembered, thick, dense with technical language, overwhelming. Dane flipped through it while she scanned for the disclosure notice Angela had mentioned. Page after page of survey data, zoning maps, financial projections. No clear warnings, no rights advisories, nothing that said, you should probably have a lawyer look at this before signing anything. This is garbage, Dane said finally. Half of this is deliberately confusing. They buried anything important under layers of corporate speak. That's legal though, right? Being confusing? Being confusing, maybe. Deliberately misleading? That's different. He pulled out his phone, snapped photos of several pages. Angela's going to have a field day with this. They couriered the packet to Angela's office that afternoon. By evening, she'd called back. "This is even better than I hoped," she said, voice crackling through the phone's speaker. They didn't just skip the disclosure requirements, they actively obscured them. And some of these financial projections are based on property they didn't own yet. That's fraud. Clear, provable fraud. "So what happens now?" Ria asked. "Now we file a motion to dismiss their lawsuit and a countersuit for fraudulent inducement, breach of duty to disclose, and emotional distress. We're asking for damages, attorney's fees, and a declaratory judgment that the contract is void." Angela paused. "Fair warning, this is going to get ugly. They're going to fight hard." "Let them fight," Dane said. "We're ready." After the call ended, Ria sat at the kitchen table feeling like she'd been hit by a truck. Everything was moving so fast. 2 weeks ago, she'd been about to sell everything and disappear. Now she was in a legal battle with the development corporation, in business partnership with her neighbor, and in whatever this was with Dane that felt both terrifying and inevitable. "You okay?" Dane asked. "I don't know. Ask me when this is over." "When it's over, we'll be busy running a successful ranch operation and probably fighting about whose turn it is to fix the fence on the North Ridge." He came around behind her chair, rested his hands on her shoulders. "But right now, are you okay?" She thought about it, really thought about it instead of giving the automatic answer. "Yeah," she said, surprising herself. "I think I actually am. Scared, definitely, but okay." "Good." His hands were warm through her shirt, steadying. "Because whatever happens with Western Horizons, whatever happens, period, you're not alone in it. I need you to actually believe that. I'm trying. Try harder." He pressed a kiss to the top of her head, casual and affectionate, and the gesture made her throat tight. "Now come on, we've got evening feeding to do, and those cattle don't care about our legal problems." The work was good, familiar. She'd spent 10 years doing these same tasks, checking water levels, distributing hay, counting heads to make sure everyone was accounted for. But having Dane there, working alongside her, made it feel different, less like grinding survival and more like building something. They worked as the sun dropped toward the horizon, painting the hills in shades of gold and amber. Wyoming in spring, still cold enough at night to need a jacket, but showing the first hints of green where winter had been all brown and gray. "I love this time of year," Dane said, leaning against the fence rail. "Everything waking up, starting over." "Fitting," Ria said. "Yeah? Feels like we're starting over too." She looked at him. "Doesn't it? Feels like we're finally starting, period." He reached out, took her hand. 10 years of waiting. I'm done waiting." "For what?" "For you to be ready, for the right moment, for permission from ghosts." He pulled her closer. "I'm just done. If you want this, want us, then let's do it. No more dancing around it." "What if I mess it up? What if I'm terrible at relationships and I drive you crazy and you regret, then we fight about it, like normal people, and figure it out?" He cupped her face in both hands. "Stop trying to predict every way this could go wrong. Just be here, right now, with me." She kissed him, standing there by the fence with the cattle lowing in the background and the wind carrying the smell of sage and snow from the mountains. Kissed him like maybe Dane was right. Maybe being present was more important than being afraid. When they broke apart, the sun had touched the horizon, bleeding red and orange across the sky. "Stay tonight," Ria said. "For real this time. Not on the couch." Dane's eyes searched hers. "You sure?" "No, but I'm doing it anyway." His smile was slow and sure and absolutely devastating. "That's my girl." The next 2 weeks were a blur of legal filings and ranch work and learning how to be with someone after a decade alone. Angela moved fast, filing their countersuit and motion to dismiss within days. Western Horizons responded with predictable fury. More legal threats, attempts to contact Rhea directly that Angela shut down immediately. The county took notice. Suddenly, Rhea wasn't just the widow selling out. She was the rancher standing up to corporate development. People she barely knew stopped her in town to offer support. The local paper ran an article about land preservation and corporate tactics. Claire organized a meeting of neighboring ranchers to discuss forming a coalition to resist future development pressure. "You started something," Claire told Rhea one afternoon, coffee mugs between them on Rhea's porch. "People are angry. They've been watching corporations buy up ranch land for years, feeling powerless to stop it. You fighting back gave them permission to be angry too." "I didn't mean to start a movement." "Best movements usually start by accident." Claire grinned. "How's it feel to be a local hero?" "Weird. Uncomfortable. Like any minute someone's going to realize I'm making this up as I go." "Welcome to being human. We're all making it up." Claire's expression turned serious. "How are things with Dane? And don't tell me it's none of my business. The whole county knows you two are together. Small towns don't keep secrets." Rhea felt heat creep up her neck. "It's good. Scary. Different." "Different how?" "I keep waiting for it to feel wrong. Like I'm betraying Jake or moving on too fast, but it doesn't feel wrong. It feels..." She struggled for words. "It feels like something I should have done years ago if I hadn't been so afraid. Jake wouldn't have wanted you to be alone forever. Everyone keeps saying that, but how do you know? How does anyone know what dead people would want?" Claire was quiet for a moment. "You're right, we don't. But I know Jake was a good man who loved you. And good men who love their wives don't generally want them to spend the rest of their lives miserable and alone. So I'm making an educated guess." "What if the guess is wrong?" "Then it's wrong. But you're still allowed to be happy. That's not conditional on anyone's permission, living or dead." Claire finished her coffee. "You want my actual advice? Do I have a choice? Nope. Here it is. Stop asking yourself if you deserve to be happy. Just be happy. The rest is noise." Simple advice. Impossibly hard to follow. But Rhea was trying. Living with Dane, because that's what they were doing now, even if they hadn't made it official, was both easier and harder than she expected. Easier because they already knew each other's rhythms, had worked alongside each other for years. Harder because intimacy meant vulnerability, and vulnerability meant risk. They fought about stupid things, whose system for organizing tools was better. Whether to sell the calves early or wait for better prices, how many blankets constituted an appropriate amount for one bed? The fights were brief and fierce, and usually ended with one of them laughing at how ridiculous they were being. They fought about real things too. About Rhea's tendency to shoulder everything alone. About Dane's habit of making decisions without consulting her. About money and risk and how to balance safety with growth. Those fights were harder. But they came out the other side, and that was new. Rhea had spent 10 years avoiding conflict because conflict might lead to loss. Learning that she could disagree with Dane, could be angry or frustrated or scared, and he'd still be there when the dust settled, that was revolutionary. 3 weeks after filing the countersuit, Angela called with news. Western Horizons wants to settle. Rhea nearly dropped the phone. "What?" "They've reviewed our evidence. They know we can prove fraud. Their lawyers are scared this goes to trial and sets precedent that makes future land acquisition harder." Angela sounded triumphant. "They're offering to drop the lawsuit entirely, waive all claims, and pay $75,000 in damages plus attorney's fees." $75,000? Rhea's brain couldn't process the number. "It's less than we could potentially get at trial, but it's certain. No risk, no prolonged legal battle. You take the money, and they go away forever." Angela paused. "It's a good offer. I recommend taking it." "Dane?" Rhea looked at him across the kitchen. He'd heard enough of the conversation to understand. "Your call," he said. "But Angela's right. This is a win." "We accept, is it?" Rhea said into the phone. "Smart choice. I'll draw up the settlement agreement. You should have a check within 30 days. Angela's smile came through in her voice. "Congratulations. You just beat a corporation at their own game." After the call ended, Rhea sat there in stunned silence. They'd won. Actually won. Western Horizons was going away, and the ranch was safe, and they had money to invest in improvements instead of just surviving another season. "We did it," she said. "You did it." Dane pulled her into his arms. "You stood up to them. You fought back. This is your win." "Our win. I couldn't have done this without you." "Maybe, but you would have found a way. You're stronger than you think." But the celebration was short-lived. That afternoon, as Rhea was checking the mail, she found something that made her blood run cold. An envelope from the county, official-looking. She tore it open. Notice of zoning hearing. Western Horizons Development Corporation had filed for a zoning change on adjacent properties, specifically Claire's ranch and 2 others that bordered Rhea's land. The hearing was scheduled for 3 weeks out. "Those bastards," Dane read over her shoulder. "They can't develop your land, so they're going after your neighbors instead. If they get those properties, they can still build their subdivision. It'll just surround you instead of including you." Rhea's stomach turned. She'd won her battle, but the war was far from over, and now her neighbors, people who'd supported her fight, were in the crosshairs. She called Claire immediately. "I know," Claire said before Rhea could speak. "Got my notice an hour ago. They contacted me 2 weeks back with an offer. I said no. Guess they're trying to force my hand through rezoning. Can they do that? They can try. Whether they succeed depends on the county commissioners." Claire's voice was grim. "And 3 of the 5 commissioners are very friendly with development interests. It's going to be close." "What can we do?" "Pack the hearing. Show up with every rancher and landowner who's opposed to this kind of development. Make it clear this isn't just about one property. It's about the character of the entire county." Claire paused. "Think you can rally the troops? You're the one who beat them. People will listen to you." Rhea looked at Dane, who nodded. "I'll do it," she said. The next 3 weeks were a whirlwind. Rhea and Dane drove to every ranch within 50 miles, talking to owners about the zoning hearing, about what corporate development would mean for their way of life. Some needed convincing. Others were already angry and just needed direction for that anger. They organized carpools to the hearing, made signs, compiled data on how similar developments in other counties had affected property values, water rights, and local infrastructure. Angela helped them prepare testimony, coached them on how to present to the commissioners. The night before the hearing, Rhea couldn't sleep. She stood on the porch in the darkness, listening to the wind, trying to find the words she'd need tomorrow. Dane came out, wrapped a blanket around her shoulders. "You're going to do great," he said. "What if I freeze up? What if I say the wrong thing and it makes everything worse? Then you'll still have tried. That's more than most people do." He pulled her against his chest. "You know what I realized?" "What?" "6 months ago, you were ready to sell everything and disappear. Now you're leading a coalition of ranchers to fight corporate development. That's not just growth. That's transformation." "I don't feel transformed. I feel terrified." "Yeah, but you're doing it anyway. That's what makes it transformation instead of just talk." He kissed the top of her head. "Jake would be proud of you. I'm proud of you." "Even if we lose tomorrow?" "Even then. Because you showed up. You fought. You gave a damn about something bigger than yourself." He turned her to face him. "That's what matters. Not winning or losing, but caring enough to try." The county commission chamber was packed, every seat filled, people standing along the walls, overflow crowding the hallway outside. Rhea had never seen so many ranchers in one place, men and women in their work clothes, faces weathered by sun and wind, hands rough from labor. These were her people. She'd never thought of them that way before, but looking at them now, she understood. They were all fighting the same fight, to preserve a way of life that didn't make sense on spreadsheets but made perfect sense when you lived it. The commissioners filed in, 5 of them, expressions carefully neutral. The chair, a man named Henderson, who owned a car dealership in town, called the meeting to order. Western Horizons went first. Their lawyer was slick, well-dressed, armed with PowerPoint presentations about economic growth and job creation and increased tax revenue. He made it sound like rezoning was not just beneficial, but inevitable. Progress marching forward. Anyone who opposed it was clinging to the past. Then it was the opposition's turn. Claire spoke first, calm and factual, laying out the environmental concerns, the strain on water resources, the impact on agriculture. She was good, professional, prepared, unflappable. Other ranchers followed. Some were eloquent, others struggled with public speaking. But they all said the same thing. This land was their heritage, their livelihood, their home. Rezoning it for development would destroy something irreplaceable. Then it was Ria's turn. She stood, notes shaking in her hands, and walked to the microphone. For a moment, looking at the commissioners, she couldn't remember a single word she'd planned to say. Then she saw Dane in the crowd. He nodded. Just once. And the words came. My name is Ria Callahan. My family has ranched in this county since 1887. That's 5 generations, 139 years of working this land, raising cattle, building a life that doesn't show up in quarterly earnings reports, but matters anyway. She took a breath, set down her notes. She didn't need them. Western Horizons tried to buy my ranch a few months ago, offered me $3.8 million to sell. That's more money than I'd see in 3 lifetimes of ranching. And I almost took it. I almost sold because I was tired and scared and I didn't think I was strong enough to keep fighting. The room was silent, listening. But I didn't sell. I stayed. And then Western Horizons sued me for $4.6 million to punish me for backing out. They tried to intimidate me into giving up, into believing that people like me, small ranchers, families who've worked this land for generations, don't matter, that we're obstacles to progress. She looked at each commissioner in turn. We beat them. My lawyer proved they committed fraud, violated disclosure laws, deliberately misled me. They settled, dropped the lawsuit, paid damages. And you know what Western Horizons did next? They moved on to my neighbors. If they can't develop my land, they'll develop around it. If they can't convince us to sell, they'll use zoning changes to force our hand. Ria leaned closer to the microphone. This isn't about progress. It's about profit. They don't care about this county or the people who live here. They care about subdividing ranch land and selling it to out-of-state buyers who want a piece of the West without having to actually work for it. Someone in the crowd clapped, then another. Henderson banged his gavel. Order, please. Ria waited for quiet. I'm asking you to deny this rezoning request, not because I'm against growth or change, but because some things are worth preserving. Working ranches, open spaces, a way of life that's been here longer than any of us and deserves to continue after we're gone. She paused. My husband died 10 years ago. He loved this land more than anything except maybe me. I spent a decade trying to maintain everything exactly as he left it, and it nearly killed me. But I learned something these past few months. Preserving something doesn't mean keeping it frozen. It means caring for it enough to let it evolve and grow, while protecting what makes it valuable in the first place. She looked at the crowd, at all those weather-worn faces. That's what we're asking you to do. Protect what makes this county valuable. Let it grow and evolve, but don't sell it out to the highest bidder. Because once it's gone, once these ranches are subdivisions and strip malls and golf courses, it's gone forever. And no amount of tax revenue will bring it back. She stepped away from the microphone. The room erupted in applause. Not polite golf claps, but real sustained applause. Henderson banged his gavel again, but he was smiling slightly, and Ria thought maybe, just maybe, they had a chance. The commissioners deliberated for 45 minutes, the longest 45 minutes of Ria's life. She sat next to Dane, their hands clasped, not talking, just waiting. Finally, Henderson called the room to order. The commission has voted on the rezoning request for properties adjacent to the Callahan Ranch. The vote is 3-2. He paused, and Ria's heart stopped. The request is denied. The room exploded, people cheering, hugging, slapping each other on the back. Claire grabbed Ria and spun her around. We won! We actually won! Ria couldn't speak. She was crying and laughing at the same time, overwhelmed by relief and disbelief and something that felt dangerously close to hope. Dane pulled her close, kissed her hard. You did it, he said. You saved the whole damn county. We did it. All of us. No. He framed her face in his hands. You led. You stood up when it mattered. That was you. Outside the chamber, reporters were waiting. The local paper, a TV station from Cheyenne, even a blogger who covered rural issues. They all wanted to talk to Rhea, the widow who'd beaten a corporation and saved her county from development. She gave interviews until her voice was hoarse, saying the same things over and over. This wasn't just about one ranch. This was about preserving a way of life, about communities standing together against outside pressure, about the value of things that couldn't be measured in dollars. By the time they made it back to the ranch, it was past midnight. Rhea collapsed on the porch steps, exhausted beyond measure. "I can't believe that's over," she said. "It's not over." Dane sat next to her. "There'll be other fights, other developers. This is just round one. You're so reassuring." "I'm realistic." He bumped her shoulder. "But we won this round. That's worth celebrating." They sat in comfortable silence, watching stars emerge as their eyes adjusted to the darkness. Somewhere in the distance, cattle lowed. The wind carried the smell of grass and sage and home. "Thank you," Rhea said quietly. "For what?" "For not letting me run. For pushing me to stay when every instinct I had was screaming to leave. For loving me even when I was too scared to love you back." She turned to look at him. "For being patient with me while I figured out how to be brave. You were always brave, you just didn't know it yet." He stood, pulled her to her feet. "Come on, let's go to bed. Tomorrow we've got a ranch to run." "Tomorrow? Can't we take one day off to recover?" "Cattle don't care if we're tired. They still need feeding." "I hate cattle." "Liar." He kissed her. "You love this life, admit it." She did. Somewhere along the way, she'd fallen back in love with ranching, not as an obligation to Jake's memory, but as a choice she made every morning. The work was still hard, the money was still tight, the future was still uncertain, but it was hers, theirs. And that made all the difference. The money from Western Horizons arrived 4 weeks later, certified check that felt both real and impossible. Angela took her portion, leaving Rhea and Dane with $60,000 to invest in the ranch. They spent hours planning, new fencing, equipment upgrades, maybe breeding stock to improve the herd. The conversations were everything Rhea remembered from those early years with Jake, when the future was a tangible thing full of possibility. But different too, because this wasn't about maintaining someone else's vision. This was about building something new. "What if we diversified?" Dane suggested one evening. Both of them bent over spreadsheets at the kitchen table. "Add some hay production on the eastern sections. Maybe lease hunting rights in the fall." "That's not traditional ranching." "No, but traditional ranching has been slowly dying for 40 years. Maybe it's time to try something different." He looked at her. "Unless you're attached to doing things the way Jake did them." The question was fair. Was she? Was keeping everything exactly as Jake left it somehow honoring him? Or was it just fear dressed up as loyalty? "No," she said slowly. "I'm not attached. Let's try different." Different meant clearing brush on the eastern sections for hay. Different meant talking to the state wildlife department about hunting permits. Different meant taking risks on things that might fail. Different was terrifying. Different was also exhilarating. By June, the ranch looked transformed. New fence posts marched across the North Ridge. The equipment shed had a new roof that didn't leak. The cattle looked healthier, better fed, filling out in ways that meant good prices at market. And Rhea looked different too. She'd put on weight she'd lost over the years of stress and poor sleep. Her face had color again. She laughed more, smiled at things that weren't just polite responses. "You look happy," Claire observed one afternoon, both of them watching Dane and Claire's husband repair a gate. "Like actually happy, not just going through the motions happy." "I think I am," Rhea said, and meant it. "Good. You deserve it." Claire bumped her shoulder. "And for what it's worth, I think Jake would approve." "You think?" "I know. He loved you. Real love wants the other person to thrive, not wither." Claire's smile was gentle. "You're thriving, finally." That night, lying in bed with Dane's arm around her, Rhea let herself think about Jake for the first time in weeks without the crushing weight of guilt. She'd loved him. She still loved him, in the way you love someone who shaped who you became. But that love didn't require her to stop living. "What are you thinking about?" Dane's voice was sleepy, warm against her hair. Jake, and you, and how it's possible to love someone who's gone and still build a life with someone else. Is it possible? Yeah, I think it is. She turned to face him. I spent 10 years thinking moving forward meant forgetting him, but that's not true. I can remember him and still choose this. Choose us. You sure? I'm sure. She kissed him softly. I'm choosing this. Choosing you. Not because Jake's gone, but because you're here, and I want to be here with you. His arms tightened around her. I love you. I've loved you for so long I can't remember when it started. I love you too. The words came easier than she expected. Probably longer than I was willing to admit, even to myself. They made love then, slow and deliberate, and afterward Rhea lay there listening to Dane's heartbeat and thinking about the future for the first time in a decade without fear. The land sale to merge the properties happened in August. Both ranches formally consolidated under the Callahan Holloway LLC. The lawyer handling the paperwork asked if they wanted to keep both names or just use one. Both, Rhea and Dane said simultaneously. It's a partnership, Rhea explained. Equal. Both names matter. The lawyer made a note, unbothered. Works for me. Signing those papers felt more significant than signing the original partnership agreement. This was permanent. This was choosing to build something together, not just survive side by side. After the signing, they drove out to the spot where their old fence line had been. Dane had pulled the post the week before. Nothing marked the boundary anymore. It was just land now, uninterrupted, theirs. Weird, Rhea said, standing where the fence used to be. I spent 10 years looking at this fence every day. Now it's gone. Good riddance. Dane came up behind her, wrapped his arms around her waist. We don't need fences between us. That's corny. It's true, though. He pressed a kiss to her neck. No more boundaries, no more keeping each other at arm's length. Just us, building something together. She leaned back against him, solid and warm and real. Think we can do it? Actually make this work long term? I think we're already doing it. Everything else is just details. By September, the ranch was operating smoothly enough that they could take a weekend off. Dane suggested the coast. Her coast, the ocean she'd never seen. They drove 12 hours to Oregon, found a tiny rental on the beach, spent 2 days doing absolutely nothing productive, just walking on sand, watching waves, eating fresh seafood, and sleeping late. On the last morning, Rhea stood at the water's edge, letting the Pacific crash against her feet, and realized something. This was what she'd been running toward when she almost sold the ranch. This feeling of possibility, of freedom, of life being more than just grinding survival. But she didn't have to leave Wyoming to find it. It had been there all along. She just had to be brave enough to reach for it. You thinking about staying here? Dane came up beside her. Trading ranch life for the coast? No. She was absolutely certain. I'm thinking about how close I came to running away from everything I actually wanted because I was too scared to believe I could have it. And now? Now I'm not running. She took his hand. Now I'm choosing to stay. To build. To fight for what matters. Which is? Home. Partnership. You. She smiled. In that order. What if I want to be first? Tough. The land comes first. That's ranch life. I can live with that. He pulled her close, kissed her with the ocean roaring behind them. As long as I'm a close second. They drove back to Wyoming on Sunday, windows down, radio playing country stations that faded in and out as they crossed state lines. Rhea watched the landscape change from coastal green to high desert to the familiar rolling grassland of home and felt something settle in her chest. This was where she belonged. Not because Jake had been here, not because obligation demanded it, because she'd chosen it, because with Dane, she'd found a way to honor the past without being trapped by it. By October, the ranch was showing real profit for the first time in years. Not huge money. Ranching was never going to make them rich, but enough to breathe easier. Enough to plan for next year instead of just surviving this one. They were fixing fence on the North Ridge when Dane said, "You ever think about getting married again?" Rhea nearly dropped the post hole digger. That's subtle. I'm not asking, I'm just asking if you ever think about it. She considered while tamping down dirt around a new post. Honestly, not really. Marriage feels like something from a different lifetime. Okay? He nodded, unbothered. What about making this official in some other way? It is official. We've got an LLC and joint bank accounts, and my toothbrush permanently lives in your bathroom. Our bathroom. Right, our bathroom. She straightened, brushed dirt off her jeans. Why? You want something more official? I want... He paused, choosing words carefully. I want to know we're building toward the same future, that this isn't just convenience or proximity, that you're choosing this, choosing me, deliberately. I choose you every day. She met his eyes. Every morning I wake up and decide to be here, to build this with you. Isn't that more real than any ceremony or piece of paper? Yeah. His smile was soft. Yeah, it is. But if you want the paper, we can do the paper. I'm not opposed. I just don't need it. I don't need it either. I just needed to know we're on the same page. We're on the same page. She went to him, cupped his face in her work-rough hands. Same page, same book, same story. You and me, building this ranch and this life together. However that looks, whatever we call it, I'm in. Good. He kissed her, tasting like coffee and the outdoors. Because you're stuck with me now. No takebacks. Wouldn't dream of it. They finished the fence as the sun dropped toward the mountains, then drove back to the house that was theirs now, legally and actually. Had dinner together, argued about whether they needed to repaint the barn before winter, fell into bed exhausted and satisfied. And if sometimes Rhea still thought about Jake, remembered the life they'd planned, the future they'd lost, it didn't hurt the way it used to. He was part of her story, always would be. But he wasn't the whole story anymore. The whole story was bigger now, messier, full of risk and possibility, and the daily choice to show up for another person and for the land and for the life they were building together. It wasn't perfect. There were hard days when the work felt endless and the money too tight and the weight of responsibility crushing. There were arguments that cut deep, moments of doubt, times when Rhea still wanted to run from the vulnerability of letting someone all the way in. But there were also mornings when she woke up next to Dane and felt grateful just to be alive. There were evenings on the porch watching sunset paint the hills in impossible colors. There were small victories, a good calving season, cattle bringing top dollar at market, the first cutting of hay from their eastern sections. There was the land itself, hard and beautiful and demanding, giving back only what you earned through work and wisdom and sheer stubbornness. And there was love. Not the easy kind from movies, but the real kind built on choice and commitment and showing up every day even when it was hard. The kind that made you braver than you thought possible. Strong enough to face down corporate lawsuits and personal demons and the terrifying work of building a future from scratch. One December evening, almost a year after Dane had shown up at her door and told her she couldn't leave, Rhea stood on the ridge looking out at their land. 1,450 acres. Winter brown but alive, dotted with cattle that wore both their brands now. The old fence line was invisible, grown over, erased. You couldn't tell anymore where Callahan land ended and Holloway land began. It was just one piece, whole and complete. Dane came up behind her, wrapped her in his jacket against the cold. "What are you doing out here?" he asked. "Remembering." "Remembering what?" "The day I almost signed that contract. The day I almost ran." She leaned back against him. "I was so sure leaving was the only way to survive, so sure staying would kill me. And now? Now I know running would have killed me, slowly, quietly, but just as dead." She turned in his arms. "Staying saved me. You saved me. You saved yourself." His hands framed her face. "I just gave you a reason to try." "We saved each other then." She kissed him, tasting snow on the wind. "That work?" "That works." They stood there as darkness fell, watching stars emerge one by one over the land that was theirs, the life they'd chosen, the future they were building with work-worn hands and stubborn hearts. It wasn't the life Rhea had planned. It was better, harder, and scarier, and infinitely more real than anything she could have planned. And when spring came again, when the land woke up green and new and full of promise, They would plant new things in soil enriched by ash and loss and the hard work of beginning again. Because that's what survival actually meant. Not just holding on, but learning when to let go. Not just enduring, but daring to want something more. Not just existing, but choosing every single day to build and fight and love and try. That was the thing nobody told you about grief and loss and starting over. It wasn't about forgetting or replacing or moving on. It was about expanding. Making room for new joy without erasing old love. Learning that your heart was bigger than you thought, strong enough to hold both yesterday and tomorrow without breaking. Rhea Callahan had learned that lesson the hard way, through 10 years of grinding survival and one terrifying leap into trust. But she'd learned it. And every day she chose to keep learning it, chose to stay instead of run, to build instead of just maintain, to love instead of just endure. Standing there under Wyoming sky with Dane's arms around her and their land stretching away into darkness, she knew with absolute certainty that she'd choose this life again. Every hard day, every fight, every moment of doubt. She'd choose it all because this was what living looked like when you stopped just surviving. This was what happened when you were brave enough to stay and fight for what mattered instead of running from what scared you. This was home. Not the place, though the place mattered. The choice. The daily decision to show up, to work, to love, to build. And Rhea Callahan was done running. She was planting roots instead, deep and strong, in ground that would hold her through whatever storms came next. Because that's what you did when you finally understood that nothing worth having came without risk, and everything worth building required the courage to begin again. The land would endure, the work would continue, and tomorrow, like every tomorrow before it, they would wake up and choose this life one more time. That was enough, more than enough. It was everything.